Now that I've introduced some of the projects within Ethereum, I think it's probably a good time to introduce the concept of Web 3.0. And realistically, I think what you are getting is just my interpretation of what Web 3.0 is, right? I think that because there's so many definitions, right, that people have for Web 3.0, it's just a bunch of confusion as to what this thing really is. So I'll try and give you cryptofern's take on what Web 3.0 is, and of course, I'm going to try and provide just some context because I think it definitely can help to understand what Web 3.0 can be, kind of maybe going through all the different iterations of the web. And so early on, the very first form of the internet, what we'll call Web 1.0, was defined by this read-only web, right? So it means that we were basically just sending and receiving information back and forth for many years, and we were able to read, store information, and send it, and we were able to read this info. And what Web 2.0 is usually defined by is this read and write feature, where the users of the internet were now able to write on top of what developers were already building and putting together, right? And so this allowed users to actually generate new content. So things like YouTube, other social networks that we're all a part of, these are basically platforms where different users can write and generate their own content. And that is really what led to a huge boom in activity in the internet, right? In particular, in regards to content. And so the idea that people believe is that with this new blockchain infrastructure, we can now build a new iteration of the internet that incorporates a lot of the same Web 2.0 stuff, but with some new features, right? And the main feature that blockchains are able to allow is this ability to provide ownership to digital assets. So this introduces the latest feature of web, right, where there exists a public internet where we can also own digital assets, right? And this is what blockchain technology in general made possible because in the way that it allowed the ability to transfer value digitally, right, over the internet using cryptocurrencies, and doing this without needing to rely on the different third parties or gatekeepers that are currently facilitating all the digital value transactions that we have. It's almost as if the current internet that we have is really is Web 2.5, right? Since we can own things digitally, right? But all these things are essentially living inside these private networks that we're then given access to, right? So we don't necessarily own, right, with quotations, the money in our bank, since it really just exists in their network that they own and manage. So our accounts can be frozen by these banks whenever they want, and then we no longer have access to our money, right? In similar ways, things like Fortnite skins, I think are a good example in terms of these are things that you buy, right? And you can buy them and your account can own them, but only within the actual Fortnite network. And these assets that you have digitally, that you quote unquote own digitally, it's not like that has like that much liquidity to it because you can't really trade it in the internet, unless maybe you trade over your entire account, right? Since that's really who ends up owning it, right? And so Web 3.0 has this vision of ownership of digital assets on these completely open networks, right? And if I had to give kind of like a real or further interpretation of Web 3.0, I think Web 3.0 has to include two things, and that's wallets and smart contracts, right? Wallets are what allow the ability for any individual to connect to a network and gain access to these different blockchains that make this own feature of Web 3.0 possible. And there's no sign up, right? There's no KYC or know your customer process, that's needed to get a wallet. It's completely open and permissionless. And our wallets, they actually, they're important for Web 3.0 because they end up serving as our identity to all these different blockchain networks, right? And the different applications or protocols that live within these networks, the wallets can also serve as the identity for that. And this is something that's really different from, what currently exists in Web 2.0, right? In the current internet, because we don't have something that can serve as our identity for every application that we use, we have to create a unique account for each network that we're a part of, right? And sometimes, out of convenience, some websites allow us to use like a Facebook account or a Google account, and that can serve as our key or identity to a lot of these applications. But usually we end up creating, a unique account, right? And so this is Web 2.0, right? If you're ever using crypto applications and they ask you for an email, right, or some type of sign-in information, then it's not Web 3.0, right? It's, if anything, it's some company that's kind of attempting to simulate the Web 3.0 experience in some way that, you're familiar with, since not a lot of people like using wallets just yet. And so rather than being in this world where we essentially have different accounts, right, that live on a bunch of these different networks, whether it's Facebook network, Google network, Apple network, the vision of Web 3.0 is that everyone can be connected to this global blockchain metaverse, right, that is completely permissionless, which is what the internet is currently like, right? The internet really is this open protocol, but it's really only like the actual networks that we've become a part of that have become permissioned, have become censored, right? And these different networks like Google and Facebook, they actually are able to monetize a lot of the activity that goes on, in terms of if we are able to, out of convenience, use the Facebook sign in or Google, our Google identity with these different accounts, they're monetizing that different activity that we generate from using these different sites, giving them to marketers or different companies, right? And so the wallets, right, they bring in this unique feature to the internet of being able to now safely and securely own digital assets, as well as also being able to serve as identity in the Web 3.0 world. So that's the first piece, right? The second piece is the smart contracts, right? To me, Web 3.0 has to involve real smart contracts on real blockchains, because this is what attempts to remove the trust that is currently placed, on different third parties to facilitate some types of digital transactions, right? And so the vision is that Web 3.0 can be this new internet that anyone can access with a wallet and do all these kind of interesting things with these other smart contract accounts that live on the internet, right? And I think that this can really help decentralize the current internet, right? Because it does give the ability for anyone to create applications that are at least more decentralized than the current internet that we have. And I'm going to bring our friend Karen again, because this is the main counter argument that some of these smart contract platforms are getting, right? About that they're actually not truly decentralized. And I do, think that there is validity to this argument, right? Because there's a lot of pushback on these central entities that back these decentralized applications, and some of these applications are backed by central entities more than others, if that makes sense. But I also think that people just get too caught up in the words that are being used, right? And they're not really focusing on what can actually be built using this smart contract technology. If we need to come up with a new semi-decentralized word, just to be less confusing, and so be it. But a lot of the new stuff that is coming out is remarkable, and I think it's objectively empowering, individuals, right, and disempowering, large corporations and those types of groups, right. Right now the script is totally being written, right. So a lot of these are all new ideas that are being tried, and I think, especially in regards to DAOs, right? DAOs, very much could have a chance to change the way that, we're able to execute governance or make decisions as a wider collective, right? DAOs are essentially, they're trying to automate as many actions as possible that a collective can do by using smart contracts on the blockchain. So whether it be a company or a community, a DAO can make proposals on how the community or company should move forward. And the different wallets can vote on these proposals, and they can use the blockchain as proof of, what the real vote is. So it's really kind of trying to somehow remove the ability for someone within a collective to act in a kind of like a self-interested way, right? Or be a bad actor, do something that the whole collective does not agree with. But either way, this is still an entity of humans, right, that backs this DAO, and that's where people give the pushback. So it can always be subject to foul play, and crypto is by no means short of examples like that. But I do think that it is objectively a much better alternative to Web 2.0. I think it's become much clearer to some people, which is some of the things that are going around in the world today. And I myself am certainly a believer in Web 3.0. I do think that the space is really brand new, not only with the applications being built on top of it, but also in just like blockchain technology in general. So I definitely am super psyched to see, what's going to come in the next few years, just as more and more builders, more and more smart people just start coming into the space and build.